Theo Faber needed a breakthrough. He sat in his office after their latest session, the quiet of the room amplifying the echo of their non-conversation. Reviewing his notes, he pieced together the fragments he had gathered. Alicia's silence was more than a trauma response. It was a fortress, constructed long before Gabriel's murder. The question that gnawed at him wasn't just why she built it, but what or who she was protecting inside. He decided to change his approach. If words failed, perhaps another form of communication would succeed. At their next session, he arrived with a small, unlined notebook. He placed it on the table between them, the crisp cover facing her. "I thought you might like this," he said. Alicia didn't move. She remained a statue in her chair, her gaze fixed on some point beyond the window. "It's just a blank journal," Theo continued, his voice calm and even. "No pressure, but if you ever feel like writing something, anything, you can use this." He didn't expect immediate success. Trust was a currency earned in small, patient increments. He let the offer hang in the air before shifting gears. "I've been speaking to some people who knew you before," he said, watching the minute landscape of her face. Her fingers, resting in her lap, twitched. "I spoke to Jean-Felix. He still has Alcestis at the gallery. He says it was your last painting." No response, but he saw the subtle tightening of the muscles in her shoulders, a slight straightening of her spine. "And I met Paul, your cousin." That got a reaction. Her lips pressed together, a faint, pale line. "And he told me about your father," Theo said, gentling his tone. "About what he said to you." Alicia's entire body stiffened, as if turned to stone. Theo leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice to just above a whisper. That must have been unbearable. Her gaze broke from the window and dropped to the floor. He couldn't decipher the emotion. Shame, inner, grief, perhaps a sediment of all three layered over years. He let the silence stretch, thick and heavy. "I want to understand you, Alicia," he said finally, "but I can only do that if you let me in." Still, she didn't speak. Yet something in the atmosphere of the room had altered. For the first time, her silence felt active, charged rather than empty. The walls weren't just cracked, their very foundation had shifted. As the session ended, Theo stood and gave her a small, respectful nod. "I'll see you soon." He left the room, closing the door softly behind him. He paused in the hallway, a peculiar sensation crawling up his neck. He had the distinct, unsettling feeling that through the door, Alicia was watching him leave. That night, restlessness drove Theo from his bed. He had made a fissure, but he needed more, a missing piece that would make the picture whole. He decided to visit the scene of the crime, the place where the story had frozen, Alicia's former home. The house stood dark and abandoned at the end of a quiet lane. The real estate company's sign was faded, leaning at a defeated angle. No one wanted a house where such a brutal crime had taken place. Gravel crunched under his shoes as he walked up the path. The air was still, heavy with a silence that felt more like a held breath. He knew he was trespassing, but the compulsion was too strong. He tried the front door. It was locked as expected. As he stepped back, a flicker of movement caught his eye near the overgrown garden. A figure stood in the shadows. Theo tensed, his pulse quickening. Who else would be here at this hour? The figure turned. It was a man, older, with a weathered face and eyes that gleamed with sharp suspicion in the gloom. "You're trespassing," the man said, his voice a low gravel. Theo swallowed, forcing himself to step forward into the dim light from a distant street lamp. "I'm a psychotherapist. I work with Alicia." The man's expression darkened. "You shouldn't be here." "Who are you?" Theo asked. The neighbor hesitated, then sighed, the aggression leaching into weariness. "I lived next door for years." Theo's mind raced. This was an unexpected opportunity. "Did you know Alicia well?" A scoff. "As well as anyone could know her. She kept to herself, but Gabriel, now he was different. Friendly, charming, the kind of man everyone liked." Theo studied him. "Did you ever hear anything?" Arguments? The neighbor looked away, towards the dark windows of the house. Once, he admitted, his voice dropping, a few days before it happened. I heard shouting. It wasn't like them. Theo's heart thudded against his ribs. Did you hear what they were arguing about? A slow shake of the head. No, but she was crying, and he was angry. Really angry. Alicia crying. Gabriel furious. A dark, cold feeling settled in Theo's stomach. The perfect facade had a fracture. Something had happened before that night, a catalyst no one had spoken of. To get the truth, he needed Alicia to tell him. The next day, when Theo entered the therapy room, he saw it immediately. Alicia was holding the journal he had given her, and on the first page, in small, delicate, yet deliberate handwriting, she had written a single word: no. Theo stared at it for a long moment. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't an explanation. But it was a response. After months of absolute silence, she had communicated. It told him she was listening, that she was engaged, that she was testing the waters. But what did it mean? No to what? No to talking? No to his understanding? No to the world's narrative? He looked up at her. She was watching him closely, her expression an unreadable mask. I see you wrote something, he said, keeping his voice neutral. That's good. She didn't react. Theo chose his next words with care. No to what, Alicia? Nothing. She held his gaze for a protracted moment, then, without a word, closed the journal and set it aside. The conversation, as such it was over. Theo exhaled quietly, burying his flicker of disappointment. He nodded as if this was precisely what he had expected. That's fine. We'll talk again soon. Leaving the room, he felt that strange shift again. Alicia was no longer just a passive patient. She was an observer, an evaluator. She was testing him. That night, his mind was a whirlwind. The argument the neighbor overheard, the haunting painting of Alcestis, her reaction to the mention of her father. A thread connected them all, but he couldn't grasp its length. He needed to go back to the source. The next morning, he found himself in the administrative office of the Grove, facing Professor Diomedes, the facility's head psychiatrist. Diomedes was an imposing man, a Greek-born psychiatrist with a reputation for brilliance and cynicism in equal measure. You believe she can recover? Diomedes asked, his sharp eyes assessing Theo. I do, Theo said, his voice firm. Diomedes sighed. Then you're more optimistic than I am. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. What do you want to know? I want to look at Alicia's files. I need to know more about her therapy before I arrived. Diomedes studied him for a protracted moment, then gave a curt nod. Fine, but be careful, Theo. Alicia isn't just any patient. She is different. Theo didn't need the warning. He already felt it. He spent hours in the records room, the smell of old paper and dust filling his senses. He combed through Alicia's medical history, session notes, the reports of the doctors who had preceded him. Most of it was a chronicle of failure, frustrated therapists, stalled progress, pages of clinical observations that led nowhere. Then he found an entry from Christian, another therapist who had worked with Alicia months before Theo's arrival. The notes were sparse, but one detail stood out: medication levels adjusted, patient showing signs of agitation, possible adverse reaction. Theo found. Why was her medication adjusted? He read further. More references to Alicia becoming more withdrawn, more anxious. A vague mention of a severe reaction during a session, with no details. Something wasn't right. Theo never trusted Christian. The man carried a smug, territorial air, as if Alicia's case was his personal property. That afternoon, he confronted him in the staff lounge. I was going through Alicia's files, Theo said, his tone casual. I saw that you adjusted her medication before I got here. Christian gave him a slow, knowing smirk. Her eyes flickered toward him. I understand why you don't speak. It's not that you can't, he paused, letting the words sink in. It's that you won't. Her fingers twitched against the fabric of her sleeve. I think something happened the night Gabriel was killed, something no one else knows. He waited, but the silence held. I spoke to your neighbor. He heard you crying. He heard Gabriel shouting. That was before the murder. Alicia's breathing changed, a slight hitch in its rhythm. You weren't just a woman who snapped one night. Theo pressed, his voice gentle but insistent. Something happened, something important, and you've been carrying it alone all this time. Alicia's gaze was steady now, fixed on him, not away. Theo exhaled. You don't have to tell me, not yet, but I want you to know I'm listening. Still, she didn't speak, but the quality of the silence had transformed. It was charged, potent. Then, in a movement so slow it seemed to defy time, she reached out and touched the cover of the journal. She didn't open it, she didn't write, but the contact was a seismic event. That night, lying awake, Theo turned his focus to the other player in the tragedy, Gabriel. The perfect husband, beloved by all. But Theo had learned that perfection was often the most convincing mask. Alicia had painted Alcestis, a woman betrayed, and she had painted Gabriel with a gun to his head, not her own. What if Gabriel wasn't the victim he appeared to be? The next morning, Theo met Gabriel's brother, Max, in a sterile cafe. Max Berenson was Gabriel's opposite, reserved, awkward, with a bitter undercurrent that seeped into every word. I'm not sure why you wanted to meet, Max said, stirring his coffee without looking up. I've told the police everything I know. I wanted to understand Gabriel better, what kind of husband he was. Max let out a sharp, humorless laugh. A good husband, a great one. He adored Alicia. Theo leaned back. And yet she killed him. Max's expression darkened. So they say. Theo caught the phrasing. So they say. You don't think she did it? Max hesitated, his fingers tightening around the porcelain cup. I don't know what to think, he sighed. I knew Gabriel better than anyone. He was a good man. He shook his head. Never mind. Theo shifted direction. I heard Alicia and Gabriel had an argument a few days before the murder. Max's jaw clenched. Where did you hear that? From a neighbor. Max exhaled sharply. I don't know what they were arguing about. Gabriel didn't talk about that stuff with me. Theo could see the tension around his eyes. Did Gabriel ever mention Alicia being unstable? A scoff. She was always unstable. He tried to help her, but she was impossible. Moods, dark spells. He'd call me sometimes, worried. He wanted to fix her. The words fix her landed with a sickening thud in Theo's stomach. They spoke of ownership, of a broken object. I always told him to leave her, Max continued, bitterness overflowing. He could have had any woman he wanted, but he chose her, and look how that turned out. Theo left the meeting with a profound unease. Max's resentment was palpable, and his story felt rehearsed, protective. Alicia was trapped in a narrative written by others, and Theo was now determined to help her rewrite it. The following session, Alicia sat with her hands resting on the closed journal. Theo saw the subtle difference in her posture, a new alertness. Alicia, he began. I saw Max. Her fingers tightened on the journal's cover. He told me Gabriel was always trying to fix you. He let the ugly verb hang in the air. Did Gabriel ever say that to you? Silence. Theo changed tact. What if I told you Max doesn't seem convinced that you killed Gabriel? Alicia's eyes snapped to his, a flash of surprise breaking through her composure. She expected him, like everyone else, to believe the official story. He was offering a different lens. Her breathing altered just slightly. She looked away, her fingers loosening, and then, in a motion that felt momentous, she reached out and touched the cover of the journal. She didn't open it, she didn't write, but the contact was a seismic event. Theo watched, breath held, as her hand moved swiftly across the page. When she finished, she pushed the journal toward him. He picked it up. The words, written in her clear hand, sent a chill straight through him. It was never about Gabriel. His pulse hammered. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. Alicia didn't answer. Her lips parted slightly, as if words might form, but then they closed. The moment receded, but she had given him a crucial piece. That night, Theo pored over photocopies of Alicia's old journal entries, the ones she'd written before falling silent. Among the fragmented thoughts and painterly descriptions, one passage stood out, written in a frantic, jagged scrawl. "I saw him. I know him. He watches me even when I sleep." A chill ran through him. Who was him? A stalker? Someone closer? The implication was terrifying. There was another person in this story, a shadow no one had accounted for. The next morning, before he could reach Alicia, Professor Diomedes intercepted him. "We need to talk," Diomedes said, his expression unreadable. In his office, Diomedes gestured for Theo to sit. "I hear she's been responding to you. That's impressive." Theo nodded cautiously. "I think we're making progress." "That's why I need to warn you," Diomedes sighed, steepling his fingers. "You're getting too close." Theo's skin prickled. "What do you mean?" "Alicia has been silent for a reason. The moment she speaks, the story changes. And not everyone wants that." Theo felt his skin prickle. "Are you saying someone doesn't want her to recover?" Diomedes didn't answer directly. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Be careful, Theo. Some truths are better left buried." The warning hung in the air, ominous and vague. Theo left the office more unsettled than ever. This was no longer just about therapy. It was about forces that wanted Alicia's truth to stay buried. He decided to bypass the system entirely. That evening, he met Jean-Félix Martin in a dimly lit cafe. The gallery owner was nervous, fidgeting with a sugar packet. "You said you wanted to talk about Alicia," Jean-Félix said. "What about her?" "The time before the murder," Theo said. "The weeks leading up to it. Did you notice anything strange?" A dry chuckle. Everything about Alicia was strange. Theo waited. "Look, Alicia was struggling, but I don't believe she killed him." The admission sent a jolt through Theo. "You don't?" A slow, firm shake of the head. "No, I never did." "Then why didn't you say that in court?" A bitter laugh. "Do you think anyone would have listened?" Everyone wanted her to be guilty. It made a neat story. Theo leaned in. "If she didn't do it, then who did?" Jean-Félix hesitated. "I don't know, but I do know she was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of someone. A man. She talked about seeing someone, being watched, being followed. I thought it was paranoia, but she was genuinely terrified." Theo's mind connected the dots to the journal entry. A stalker, perhaps. But then she stopped talking about it altogether. "Who should I be asking about this?" Theo pressed. Jean-Félix looked uncomfortable, then leaned in, lowering his voice. "Max, Gabriel's brother?" A nod. Max had feelings for Alicia, it was obvious. He was always around, always finding excuses to see her, and she couldn't stand him. He paused, remembering. A few weeks before Gabriel died, she came to the gallery very upset. She wouldn't say why, but she said something like, "He won't leave me alone." Theo felt a cold certainty crystallize through him. Alicia's fear had a face, and it might be the face of her husband's brother. The next morning, in the therapy room, he went straight to the point. "Alicia, I spoke to Jean-Félix. He told me you were afraid before Gabriel died. He said someone was watching you." Her fingers twitched. "You don't have to tell me his name," Theo said, his voice a soft murmur. "Just tell me if I'm right." The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Then, slowly, painfully, Alicia nodded. Theo's heart pounded. He leaned closer. "Alicia, the man who hurt you, was it Max?" Her expression flickered with surprise, then hesitation. not a confirmation. A darker, more terrible possibility dawned on Theo. "What about Gabriel?" he asked, the words barely audible. Alicia stiffened, a full body recoil, her hands clenched, her shoulders hunched, her breathing turned shallow and rapid. It was the most visceral reaction he had ever seen from her. Theo swallowed against a dry throat. Did Gabriel know? Alicia's lips parted again, but she shook her head. Not a denial, but a gesture of overwhelming complexity, as if the truth was too tangled for a simple yes or no. "Alicia, if you want to tell me, you can. I promise I'll believe you." Her gaze locked onto his, searching, weighing the sincerity in his face. Then, slowly, she reached for the journal. She flipped through the pages, found a blank one, and began to write. When she was done, she turned it toward him. The words were sharp, etched with pain. "I loved Gabriel, but he betrayed me." Betrayal. The word changed everything. Theo looked up, but her expression was closing again, the shutters coming down. He had to keep her in this moment. "Alicia," he said, his voice urgent yet soft, "I need to understand. What did Gabriel do?" Alicia exhaled, a shuddering breath. Her fingers tightened around the pen, and she began to write again. Theo watched, his own breath held, as the story unfolded on the page. "He let him in." Theo read the line, his blood turning cold. He let him in. Gabriel had opened the door to the monster. Alicia was trembling now, her body rigid, her eyes fixed on the floor as if watching the memory play out. Theo, acting on an impulse he didn't fully understand, reached across and gently covered her hand with his. She flinched, but didn't pull away. "Alicia," he whispered, "tell me what happened that night." And she wrote. The words poured out in a torrent of remembered horror. The night Gabriel died, she had been waiting, consumed by a day-long dread that had sharpened into certainty. She was being watched. She had seen him, the man, standing outside. When Gabriel finally came home, she ran to him, desperate, begging him that they needed to leave, to flee somewhere safe. But Gabriel had looked past her. He had looked toward the door, and then he had unlocked it. He had let him in. A masked man entered their home. Alicia begged Gabriel to do something, to stop it, but he just stood there, silent, passive, as if this was an expected, even arranged event. The man tied them both to chairs. He stood before them, silent, holding a gun. Then he turned to Gabriel and asked a single horrifying question. "Do you want me to kill her?" Theo's breath caught. He read the words again, disbelief and dread warring within him. Gabriel had been given a choice, and his answer was yes. Theo felt nauseous. Gabriel had chosen his own life over Alicia's. In that moment, everything Alicia knew, everything she trusted, shattered. The masked man then turned the gun on Gabriel instead. The shot rang out. Gabriel fell. In the ringing silence that followed, Alicia had taken the gun. She pressed it to her own head, ready to join him in death, but she hadn't pulled the trigger. Instead, she had descended into a silence so deep and absolute, it became her new identity. The world had already written its story. Gabriel was the tragic victim. Alicia was the monstrous, silent murderer. The man who had truly done it had simply vanished into the night. Theo closed the journal, his hands unsteady. This was the truth, raw and devastating. Alicia was not a killer. She was a witness to her own betrayal, framed for a murder she didn't commit. And now, with a horrible, dawning clarity, Theo knew who the masked man was. He had always known, because he was him. The realization sat in his gut like a stone. He was the masked man. His obsession with Alicia had begun long before he became her therapist. He had read her diary, felt a twisted kinship with her pain. He had watched her, followed her, convinced himself he was the only one who truly saw her. That night, he put on a mask. He had broken in, not to kill Gabriel, but to force a revelation, to make Alicia see that the man she loved was cowardly, disloyal, unworthy. He had given Gabriel the choice, and when Gabriel chose to sacrifice Alicia, Theo turned the gun on Gabriel in a fury of righteous punishment. He had done it for her, but in the aftermath, he saw not gratitude in her eyes, but abject terror. She didn't see a liberator, she saw another monster. So he fled, leaving her with the gun, leaving her to be consumed by the silence he, in his arrogance, had believed he could break. Now, sitting in his office with her written confession before him, panic surged. Alicia had remembered. She had written it down. It was only a matter of time before she told someone else. The police, the authorities, her wife, Kathy, who believed him to be a good man, a healer. He could not let that happen. There was only one way to ensure the truth stayed buried with the past. That night, under the cover of institutional quiet, Theo slipped into Alicia's room at the Grove. The dim nightlight cast long shadows. Alicia lay still in her bed, the deep, rhythmic breathing of drugged sleep marking the time. A syringe, prepared earlier, was cool in his palm. One quick injection, and the final witness would be silenced. He moved closer, reaching for her arm. Her eyes snapped open. She was awake, fully, terrifyingly awake, and she was looking at him with a calm, knowing clarity. Theo froze, the syringe hidden in his fist. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Alicia's lips. She knew. She had always known on some level who he was, and she had been waiting for this, her final condemning move. With slow, deliberate precision, she lifted her hand from under the blanket and pressed the nurse's call button mounted on the wall beside her. A loud, piercing alarm blared through the hallway. Theo stumbled back, his mind screaming him to run, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. The door burst open. A nurse stood there, her eyes wide, then narrowed in understanding as she took in the scene, the therapist in the patient's room at night, the panic on his face. Shouts echoed down the hall. Footsteps thundered toward them. As security personnel swarmed into the room, Theo was wrestled back. His last sight was of Alicia, sitting up in her bed, her gaze locked on his. In her eyes was no fear, no triumph, but a profound, unassailable quiet. She had won. Her silence had finally spoken, and it had undone him completely. In the days that followed, Alicia's journal entry became the cornerstone of a reopened investigation. The truth unspooled. Slowly, then all at once, Theo Faber was arrested. His obsession, his stalking, his crime, all were laid bare. The world that had been fooled by Gabriel's perfect facade was now fooled by Theo's healer's mask. Alicia Berenson was exonerated. The silent patient had finally spoken, not with a voice, but with the written word, and the world was forced to listen. Her journey was not one of guilt to innocence, but from being erased to being seen. In the end, the man who sought the ultimate control over her narrative was the one rendered powerless, his own silence now a prison of his making. The patient was silent no more.